Welcome into Unpaid Interns. I'm Griffin Epstein. Good morning. We have another live show here on our IU Sports Media YouTube page, or you're listening on our podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. And after another exciting weekend of extremely exciting weekend of IU sports and a very interesting last couple of days in the sports world, we've got a great man to talk about it. Tom Ackerman is an IU alum and the current director of KMOX Sports in St. Louis. Tom, how you doing this morning?
Griffin, I'm doing great. Great to see you. How are things going? Love the show as always.
No, I appreciate it. Things are going great, and obviously things going really well for IU football over the weekend. An incredible win over Penn State, their first top 10 victory since 1987. I was just asking you before the show when you graduated, and you said, 97, so 10 years later. So do the math, you're about 8 years old the last time IU had a top 10 victory in for football. What was your reaction, watching IU football for these last 20 years to their victory on Saturday?
And I was thinking about it. The last time they were ranked this high was my freshman year, 1993. The Hoosiers are ranked 17th in the nation, and well-deserved. I mean, they played great. I'll tell you, Griffin, as an IU football fan and as an alum, I was waiting for the bad news. I was waiting for something bad to happen. I was watching it, forgetting how painful it can be. It just, what will happen. And in the end, I thought the game was lost. Penn State was driving down, and when they did scored too early, the opening was there. And when IU drove down, I felt confident in the quarterback, Mike Penix, that he would get the job done. They tied the game. Penn State comes down, scores, kicks an extra point, and now it's up to Indiana to rely on Penix again. They score, and I love it. Tom Allen, after 33 years of not beating a top 10 team, recognizes the situation and goes for it, and they get it by an eyelash, and I was elated. What did I do? I was sitting in my office at home watching it, and my daughters are watching it with me, so that's very special. I got my 14-year-old and my 9-year-old with me, and the dogs. So Audrey says, "Dad, if they call it a touchdown," this is my 9-year-old. She said, "If they call it a 2-point conversion and they win, are you going to run a lap around the yard for us?" And I go, I will do that if they call it a 2-point conversion. So the replay shows 2-point conversion. They can't overturn it. And I'm out the door and I'm running a lap around the backyard, and the girls are cheering and the dogs are chasing me. It was a nice fan moment for this IU guy.
Sounds like a fun moment. I mean, we saw so many fun videos of IU fans on Saturday night, their reactions to multiple, incredible plays, obviously down the stretch. I think what stood out for me is that it felt like, IU was going to, as you said, blow another game after you've watched, especially during the Kevin Wilson and Tom Allen eras over the last 10 years, IU continuously, be in that moment and then not be able to finish. And this time, they blew it and should have lost, and they came back. I mean, from watching, what do you feel is different about this time? Was it Michael Penix you talked about, just Tom Allen as a head coach? What made it different?
Peyton Ramsey's a really good quarterback, and I thought that he did a terrific job up at Northwestern in the highlights that I saw. But I do feel confident in Penix. I think he's a playmaker, and I felt like on that last 2-point conversion that they would go to him, that they would find a way. Either he's going to make it through the air or with his legs, and in this case, with an outstretched arm. So I felt very confident about Penix being in that situation. But Tom Allen's changed the culture, and it wasn't just this game. It was before that. He has these players and his staff believing, and what he's doing is they've been very aggressive recruiting, and they're telling players to believe in what they think is best, which is love each other. We're going to continue to work, and we're going to outwork everybody, and we're always going to believe we can win. And you know what? When it starts to turn like this, it reminds me of some programs that I've covered. The University of Missouri had a losing culture for a long time until Gary Pinkel came around. When they hired Pinkel from Toledo, he had this team believing that they could win, and it started to permeate into their recruiting. And you started to see they're adding depth. Were they adding 5 stars? No. What Missouri was doing was adding depth. And so now when Indiana plays in Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State, They're not gassed after their first stringers. They can keep throwing different waves of players. Even watching Missouri, one thing that sticks with me from this was probably 2001, early in Pinkel's time there. He's now the winningest coach in Missouri history. They lost to number 2 Texas at home. And I remember after the game in the press conference, somebody asked, I think they lost by like 18 or 17 points, but it was a pretty good game. And Texas was number 2 in the country, a dominant team at that time. And someone asked, can you take some solace or some confidence in how you played toe-to-toe with Texas? And he got upset with the question. And he said, that's the problem around here, is that, we need to create a culture of winning around here. And they did from that point on. Tom Allen's handled it a little bit differently. He is Mr. Positive, and he has the players believing it. It starts there, absolutely. And soon you stack more wins like that, you'll have the fans believing as well. And when we do come out of this pandemic, my hope is that Memorial Stadium is packed before the game, that tailgaters rush into the stadium for kickoff, and that it's 90% IU fans rocking and rolling.
Imagine that. I mean, when this is the last time that's happened at Memorial Stadium? It's certainly been a long, long time. I guess one of the big questions, and now that we're about 4 days removed from Saturday, is can IU take this momentum going forward and make this a season? Do you see this as as a season-changing victory that IU maybe can beat a Michigan, a team they haven't beaten since the 80s, maybe beat a Wisconsin, get something like 7 wins? That would be a success. And just big picture as well. I mean, you mentioned Missouri becoming a really consistent program. I mean, I remember they made it to the SEC championship game the first year they were in the SEC. Obviously, that was well into Gary Pinkel's era. But does IU have the capability to go down that road now with this breakthrough win?
It's interesting. I was as just being cynical and joking around with my friends. I texted right after the win, and we're all like, high-fiving virtually through our text message group. I said, watch us go lose to Rutgers. And kidding, of course, they're going to beat Rutgers. But that was my mentality just as an IU fan, right? As soon as we hit up here, it starts to come down. But they'll handle Rutgers because he has them now focused and concentrating on who they are. It's going to start becoming who Indiana is. Not the opponent. If you play the style of football that you're expected to play, physical, punishing, finish your tackles, finish your blocks, and execute, minimize mistakes, you're going to win a lot of football games. But I'll tell you what, Griffin, I want Michigan. I want them, and I want them bad. And there have been some, Penn State has been very close through the years. Ohio State's going to take a while. Okay, Ohio State is loaded and very, very good. But Michigan, those games have been pretty close for the most part over the last several years, and I'd love to see them get their shot at going 3-0. Got to beat Rutgers first. Got to handle your business this weekend.
Well, Tom, obviously IU football, very exciting. Wanted to talk about the big story last night was the World Series. And, you were at KMOX Sports flagship of St. Louis. I have to say St. Louis is probably the best baseball city in the country. So I know you're very well versed in baseball in the World Series. What were your reactions to last night's game, clincher for the Dodgers, from everything to, Kevin Cash pulling Blake Snell to obviously the Justin Turner situation after the game?
Yeah. I mean, we definitely follow it very closely around here, and we celebrate the Cardinals' past World Championships. It always is a festive time around here. I think it hurts when the Cardinals get knocked out, but it is nice the fact that the Cardinals have been in the playoffs 14 times since 2000. So, we get used to it, and we get a little spoiled around here, to be honest. So once the pain wears off of them getting eliminated, which in this case was the Padres in the wild card round, people start to pay attention and really inspect it. One thing before we get to the Dodgers is the fact that Randy Arozarena plays for the Rays. That hurts people around here. He's a former Cardinal. He was traded in the offseason. They took a prospect that they liked in Arozarena and paired him with Jose Martinez, who they thought they couldn't really find a place for him. That was before the DH came into the National League, and traded him for Matthew Liberatore. Very good lefty pitching prospect, but Arozarena, has a Babe Ruth type postseason. He hits 10 home runs, and people are really upset about that around here. The other side is watching the Dodgers, and I mean, I think we learned two things here. We learned that a team that has a very high payroll and is aggressive can do it and get the job done. But we also learned that a team that has a low one can also get the job done. The difference was the Dodgers lineup proved to be too much, and it's proved to be too much for Kevin Cash. He could not keep Blake Snell in the game in the sixth inning, and it was not a second guess. It was a first guess. I thought it was a really poor move. I mean, I think what it shows is that sometimes advanced analytics are taken way too far, and the conventional wisdom and the gut feeling that Blake Snell is giving you everything. He's pitched no two-hit ball with 9 strikeouts. I don't care if he has to face Mookie Betts or Corey Seager or Babe Ruth a third time in the lineup. You keep him out there, and it backfired on him. And then Justin Turner. So Turner, if the Dodgers win the game, and they deserve it. I mean, they were the best team in baseball, and I don't want to say that they don't. Justin Turner tests positive for COVID in the middle of the game. They learned the test result, and that's because his first test was inconclusive. So the rapid test that they had on Tuesday morning got to a lab in Utah in time for them to get his test taken and checked, and it got back that he had to be removed from the game. So he has to be removed from the game. But for him to come back out on the field after the game is kind of mind-blowing, especially since it's clearly stated that you isolate, and that's the MLB protocol, and he defied those orders. It's kind of like, how does that happen? Well, he did it on his own. I feel for somebody who wants to join a celebration, but personally, I would have rather seen everybody kept a little safer out there, including families, spouses, children. Just being honest there. But it's been a very strange 2020. Think about this, Griffin. MLB got through the baseball season, and I'm happy that they did. And there were a lot of hurdles they had to clear. In fact, our own team here, the Cardinals, were quarantined twice and missed 17 days, and somehow got just about every game in. What if the Rays had won the game? What if the Rays had won the game yesterday? Would there have been a game 7 tonight? Would they have played? How do they do that? I mean, if the Dodgers find out they have a positive test, wouldn't they all have to be tested? And would the Rays would all have to be tested? How in the world does this happen? So in some ways, baseball escaped that situation, but it is something that Commissioner Rob Manfred will have to handle here in the coming days.
And it was just overall felt like a very, chaotic season for baseball. I think most people, myself included, didn't think that they were going to make it through, especially when you saw what happened with the Marlins and the Cardinals early in the year. And then obviously, the labor disputes early on of trying to get a season. It took so long for them to figure out a plan.
Oh, yeah. And think about this. Remember who it was in May who spoke out and said, I'm not going to take a pay cut. In fact, if I don't get full pay, I might not play, threatened not to play. That was Blake Snell, of all people.
Wow.
Back in May. And isn't it interesting or ironic or coincidental, however you want to put it, that he ends up being the one that they took out too early at the end of the year. So anyway.
That's an interesting connection. I didn't even think of that. What I was getting to is just kind of, looking almost at the state of baseball, how Rob Manfred is running this league right now. It feels like there's a lot of organizational problems. There was obviously criticism of Manfred recently calling the Commissioner's Trophy a sheet of metal or something like that. And we've seen, the numbers about baseball, youth participation declining, fan numbers declining. After a crazy year, obviously, for every sports league, where do you see baseball going forward right now?
Well, baseball is a romantic sport. And what I mean by that is, we fell in love with it at some point. It really does stir emotions and the heart. And it is a kid's game. We learned it as kids, and we have an attachment to it, whether it was your first time at the ballpark or your first time swinging a bat or your mom or dad pitching to you, playing catch to you. There's a great connection with the game of baseball. It hurts me to see the minor leagues being changed. I think that a lot of towns across America, that's the first glimpse of baseball, and baseball needs that to continue to grow. We need to grow baseball in the inner cities and make it affordable and available to all kids to be able to play as well. Griffin, Rob Manfred is a labor lawyer. That's who they have running baseball. The commissioner is a labor lawyer. That's what he is. So he's going to talk and speak and come off in those terms. I would prefer to see baseball led by someone who loves the game as much as we do. I'm not saying that he doesn't, but it just doesn't come off that way. It doesn't come off as well. I respect a lot of his career for sure, but I think baseball doesn't. I don't think games need to be sped up. I think that baseball is a beautiful game, and I think that some adjustments can be made here and there. But I don't like heavy rule changes and tinkering with the game. It's a great game. It's a beautiful game, and it should be taught and passed along with changes. Understanding it's going to adapt, but it should be taught and expressed and understood. And by the way, it needs to stay relevant and needs to stay in the news. And the off season, I think, is pretty important too, to be able to market these players and get geared up for 2021. Hopefully we can get COVID behind us, but for right now, they have a lot they have to deal with.
One last question on baseball, Tom. This is more kind of my personal curiosity. As I mentioned, you kind of always look at St. Louis as being, maybe the last true baseball town in America that is all behind the Cardinals, incredible attendance numbers, and a town that is really committed to its team when you don't really see that anymore. It's a lot more about football. If you turn on the local radio, they're always talking football, always talking the NFL team. Obviously the NFL team left St. Louis, but what makes St. Louis such a baseball town that's different from most of America?
I think that it has been passed down through the generations. We're talking about a team that's been around since the 1800s, and they have won, and that certainly helps. I think they've had great players that have been talked about and discussed through generations. So Stan Musial, Red Schoendienst, Bob Gibson, Lou Brock, 4 legends that we have lost. In the case of this year, Bob Gibson and Lou Brock both passed away. Red Schoendienst and Stan Musial before them here in this decade. And thinking about those 4, no matter how old you are, you feel connected to them because your parents told you about them, your grandparents did, and their stories are told over and over again. So that's a huge connection to the team. St. Louis is not a large market. Baseball and sports in general are a huge draw. The Cardinals are also a regional draw. As one of the biggest cities in this area, we draw fans from Arkansas and Kentucky and Illinois and Iowa and all throughout. Our Cardinals radio network itself has 145 stations, which is the largest in Major League Baseball. So it makes St. Louis a destination, and the city certainly embraces that. It really comes down to a winning tradition, championships, standards being set very high from that standpoint, and people really rallying around the team. And yes, people do play the game here. A lot of great players. You're seeing them all over Major League Baseball that come out of St. Louis. One of the biggest names would be Max Scherzer, St. Louis kid, but there are a lot. Most recently, last night, you have Pete Fairbanks pitching for the Rays. Is from Webster Groves, a St. Louis neighborhood. So people are very proud of the game and play the game growing up here and love to communicate the game and care very much. And they do care about the game. They love the Cardinals, of course, but they pay attention to your team too. And in a lot of cases, they want your players too. Cardinals fans are very, very hungry and are ready for a championship. And they put a lot of heat on the front office here and on the manager here. And that's okay. That's passion. I don't think the Cardinals would want it any other way.
Well, it's a good transition to another fan base that puts a lot of heat on its coach and on its organization, Indiana basketball, and college basketball coming up next month. So want to talk a little bit about that, and we'll start with Indiana, obviously a team that you followed. High expectations for this team coming in, obviously a great recruiting class led by Christian Lander. It's going to be a really strange season, but what are your expectations for IU basketball this year?
Yeah, I'm with you on the season. Thinking of Assembly Hall not packed is a different feeling, but I have now gotten accustomed to watching sports and knowing that the fans are still with them. The fans are still there. They're just watching from home or wherever else. I have high expectations for this Indiana team. I always do, but I like this team returning. You mentioned Lander, very, very exciting. I think this will be, in a lot of ways, Rob Finney's team. I think that he is at that point in his career where he can take over as a true leader, and I love the way that he plays the game. I love their inside game. I really do. I think Joey Brunk is a tremendous physical player that I'd love to see what he can do healthy in a full season. Really like Race Thompson. And I liked him from the first time I saw him touch the basketball wearing the Indiana uniform. Just, some players just have a good feel for the game, and the ball kind of finds them. And he's that type of player for me. So I see a lot of growth there as well. I mean, I could go up and down the roster, but I feel like every year the importance is guard play. And I do look to Finney to be the leader that this team needs. Now, Archie Miller knows the game, and there will be pressure for sure to deliver a team that not only makes the tournament but can make a deep run. But he knows the game, and he's building a team that fits every year, that fits his style and his kind of play. And that's all that Indiana fans can ask for, is a team that is going to get after it. They're going to get on the boards. They're not going to turn the ball over. The biggest thing that Indiana's been lacking that, we all miss is the three-point shot. Who's going to light it up from the outside? And I think you could see some improvement there this year. But that's the thing that's always sort of been the hallmark of Indiana basketball, is that you had a couple of guys that could hang out on the outside and bomb away threes and get hot. That's what they need.
And you mentioned the pressure on Archie Miller. Last year, if he didn't make the tournament, originally, he possibly could have been gone. Obviously, there was no tournament and things changed in March. What is the pressure on him this year? If, say, they don't make the tournament, do you think he deserves to be fired? Where do you think this program stands in his fourth year at the helm?
Well, I think that the team would have to do well. I think that any coach at that level is going to be held to a very high standard. So I think that that there has been a lot of time for him to build a program and to put something together. I have a lot of confidence that they're going to be good and that he'll well keep his job for a while. I think he's the right fit for Indiana University. I really do. And I think that he continues to surround himself with staff that they're all going to hold each other accountable. I have a lot of belief that Archie Miller is in the right place and that Indiana has the right coach. I do think it's a good fit. I don't anticipate or feel like a change would be made unless absolutely necessary, Griffin. I think that if there were rumblings that beyond basketball things were unsettled or it was a program in disarray, I just don't feel that. I feel there's a lot of organization. There's good basketball being taught. Right now, it's just a matter of staying healthy and delivering. And it is definitely, it's on the coach to get that done. So I would think that he's in always one of the hottest seats in college sports is the Indiana basketball coach. It's a big time job, but I think he's up for that challenge. And I feel good about it. I feel good about him taking that on. I've just like any Indiana fan, I've always had these, dreams of who could be the Indiana coach, who could they end up getting? And you start coming up with a list of these fantasy dream coaches. Let's be realistic here. This is not the NBA. The Indiana is not one of the top 5 elite programs in America anymore. It's still, though, a program with a very passionate, strong fan base, a ton of tradition, and the coach that does get it done is going to be loved forever. And I would think that that's a fun challenge for Archie Miller, and I think that he can get there.
Tom, you call a fair amount of college basketball over the winter, especially for a lot of smaller schools across the Midwest. And I think a big question this year, we're expecting almost entirely college play. How is that going to affect mid-majors making the tournament, making runs, or, even seeing upsets, like we saw Evansville knock off Kentucky last year in a crazy upset. What are your expectations for college basketball, especially for a lot of those Midwest mid-majors that it always feels like every year there's one of those teams is making a run in the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, and I do games for the Missouri Valley Conference, and they always have one. They always have
Yeah.
one that is a real pain to play against, and that they will again. I mean, there are some very good coaches in that league, very good talent. I've covered the league for a long, long time, over 20 years, and I haven't seen talent and depth of talent like this. So it's very good. And, even before that, you still had a Wichita State show up in the Final Four. You had Loyola showing up in the Final Four. You had Northern Iowa always being a pain in the neck in the tournament. And so these teams are recognizable, and Wichita State's not in the league anymore, but they replace and move on, and they're successful. They moved Valparaiso into the Valley, and it's another school in the state of Indiana that's going to continue to grow and bring in talent. I think that the recruiting battle is the biggest one. I think making sure that you can bring in great recruits, continue to bring them into these programs, and tell them you're going to get the exposure, the playing time, the TV time. You don't have to always go to the big time programs. You can come here and be very successful and get a great education, and we'll prepare you if you want to play at the next level. Can they pull? Absolutely, they can knock off the major programs. I see it every year. It's just a 40-minute basketball game. I mean, you toss the ball up and things happen, especially when it's a team that's been through the battles to get to the NCAA tournament. So I still think that college basketball can be healthy, but to be honest, I'll treat it just like I treated the baseball season. I'm taking it day to day, like until I see a schedule and then a schedule being executed, like players and teams facing each other with referees and broadcasters, and I'll feel a little more confident. I think each day we're learning more about this virus and how we live with it and play with it.
What are you hearing so far from coaches, talking about how are they preparing their players when it's very unusual? You don't have a schedule. A lot of teams have really no idea what their schedule is going to look like, yet we're less than a month out from when teams are allowed to play games.
Yeah, I'm closest with Travis Ford right now, just because he's right down the street from here. St. Louis University is just up the street, several blocks from here, and they have a top 25 caliber team. I mean, they're going to be very good. In fact, I told him that I said, with all respect to Charlie Spoonhour and Lorenzo Romar and Brad Soderberg and Rick Majerus and Jim Cruz, there have been some great coaches that have come through here. I'm not sure that I've seen a SLU team on paper that's better than this one. He will work them extremely hard because of that and raise the standards for them. And they don't know exactly what their schedule is, but they're getting an idea. He told me likely they start in a pod system up in Nebraska, and then they do have a plan to play some games at home. They have to just work on their own practices and getting down what they do. So he's worked them very hard. The practices are, players are masked when they at every chance they possibly can be, and then they get them out on the floor and they work them. And I think the hard balance is the academics and athletics right now. Campuses are different. Things are done virtually. Everything is different. So trying to keep these players into as close to normal as possible. They're not getting dressed in locker rooms. They're showing up, and they're not tightly congregating. But other than that, they're playing hoops. And try to keep it as normal as possible, but work them just like they would normally be worked. So when the green light comes on and it's time to play for real, they're ready. That's what he's trying to do.
A couple more questions for you, Tom, as we wrap our show up for today. You have had a successful career in media coming out of IU. It's a very tough time, especially right now, just for student media and student journalists. And we kind of thought maybe things would be back to normal in the spring, but obviously the case numbers, especially in the Midwest, are not going in the right direction right now. What would you say to college students and student media members working in the field right now? What can they do to keep on betterment their career, especially as we're in month 7, 8 now of these tough times with no light really at the end of the tunnel?
Well, I would keep in mind that what you're doing right now is you're a part of history, and you're doing something that no one before you has ever done. You're learning the craft during a pandemic. It's a challenge that I know is hard, and it's something whether you're in the media school or otherwise. I know it's hard, and I know it's something that is a daily challenge. But you're the first ones to go through it, and you actually will be able to teach people, and those experiences will greatly benefit you throughout your life. This is a time in our lives where we all are adjusting and changing. One thing that I would make sure that you do is to keep your enthusiasm for the craft itself. It is a fun job. It's something that not many people get to do. And it's going to greatly benefit you throughout your career to find ways to have fun with it. It is fun. It really comes down to the love of the job. It's not always about, I know you hear it too, that these jobs aren't always glamorous, and it takes a lot of hard work and weekends and nights and grinding, and all of that stuff is true. But the reason that you do all of that is because of your love for it. It all starts with the love and passion for the job. Once you have that, you're going to want to work because you like it and you love it. So that's really where it comes from. I think that we have a chance to give people something normal. In the entertainment business, in the media business, we have a chance to let people enjoy themselves for a little while, especially those of us who work in sports. And so I always think about that. I think about when I do a show in the morning, that person listening to me on the radio might have had a tough day yesterday, but for a little while, I'm going to let them escape into an area of just enjoyment and entertainment and companionship. And I started a show. That's the other thing. Create new content. Do something different. I started a show out of my garage just for fun. I called it the Garage Happy Hour, and it really started to take off. Celebrities said yes. Listeners liked spending a half hour with celebrities and letting us just talk, in some cases with me drinking a beer. And I should say all cases. And but the Garage Happy Hour has been a fun project, and it just showed that we can create content like this, online, and having some fun. This is the future. Like, this isn't going away. We will definitely be doing shows this way forever, and we've learned how to do that, and we'll be able to teach others how.
Great advice, Tom. One final question for you was Coach Bob Knight's birthday just over the weekend. I saw you put a tweet about how he had impacted your life. I was just wondering if you could tell everyone listening and watching that story with your interactions with Coach Knight.
Yeah, the quick story on that is that when I was about 16 years old, my dad and I went to a celebrity golf tournament in Vail, Colorado, the Gerald Ford Invitational. It was to see our friend Larry Ziegler, who played on the PGA Tour. He's now retired, and he invited us to go see him play, and his playing partner that day was Bob Knight. They're good friends to this day. And so we went down to visit with him, and Larry, I was a caddy at a country club in St. Louis, and he knew that. And he said, "Hey, Tommy, you want to caddy for Coach Knight?" Like, sure. So Coach's like, "Let's go." So I did. And we had, while I tried to break the ice early with him, I did get him to warm up. He warmed up to me. I warmed up to him. We had a great conversation. And as it turned out, he offered to have the athletic department set up a tour of campus for me. I didn't think that he would remember it, but a couple weeks later, I did get a phone call at home from the athletic department in Indiana that Coach Knight wanted me to be shown around the campus. And I thought, I'm being recruited by Bob Knight. This is amazing. I did end up going to IU, and right before my freshman year, my dad died suddenly of a heart attack. And Coach Knight, when he found out about it, was incredibly kind. He was wonderful to me. He gave me his contact information so that if I needed it, I could call him. What a feeling that was for an 18-year-old kid who just lost his father, to be able to have somebody like that provide me comfort and give me confidence in a new world. So I think about it every time I come back on campus, how great he was to me, but how great IU was to me and continues to play in my life. I literally grew up and grew into a man on the IU campus, And without that meeting with Bob Knight, my life would be completely different. I don't know. I would have gone to school somewhere else and had a whole new set of friends and experiences. So I owe a lot to Coach Knight, and any chance I get to tell the story, I love to do it.
That's an incredible story, Tom. Really appreciate you coming on today. Great perspective from everything going on, from IU football to the World Series to college basketball. Great job today, and just best of luck at KMOX Sports going forward in these tough times.
I appreciate it. Great job yourself, and to all your viewers. Can't wait to get back on campus where we can all be back together.
I can't wait for that. As always, check out our Unpaid Interns episodes on our IU Sports Media YouTube page, or you can check them out in audio form on Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast. We'll be back on Friday with our final episode of the week of Unpaid Interns. But until then, for Tom Ackerman, I'm Griffin Epstein. So